Hello, this is going to be a video on how to fix your Xbox controller directional pad if it is very unresponsive, or if it is having problems sticking on one particular side. I've already done it with this Xbox 360 controller, but what I'm talking about when I relate to the word sticking means that this controller has a similar problem. You'll notice that when I push sideways and up, nothing really happens. But when I push down, it makes contact with this little edge here. The side and top don't do it, but the bottom does. That can lead to one, it being not very responsive, and two, you can accidentally push the wrong button. What we want to do is make sure that all the buttons press in their directions without touching this little edge ring here. So I've already done it on this one, and as you can tell, none of the directions push on this little ring here, on the little edge. This one was the worst one I had. It was even worse than the green one I showed you earlier. It was basically resting on that little edge, so I could barely push it down to begin with, and that's why I never used this controller, because the D-pad was so terrible. But now after fixing this is actually the best D-pad that I have out of all my controllers. Now, in addition to that, this video is also going to teach you how to fix the responsiveness of the D-pad. Now you'll notice when I push sideways, it only goes sideways. Even if I push in the middle section, like the diagonal, if I push sideways, it still only goes sideways. If I push down and sideways, it goes both ways. But as long as I'm pushing pressure on the sideways section, it will never go up or down. It'll only go sideways. And the same thing when I push down. If I push down, it'll only go down. So what it does is it follows the movement of your finger, and it follows the pressure that your finger applies without following necessarily the direction or the location at which you're pointing your finger. On the green controller, which I haven't done anything to, you'll notice when I push sideways in the middle portion, it goes down and sideways. Or if I push down on the middle portion, it goes down and sideways. So there's no really way to, differentiate the two. So if you're accidentally, you want to push up, if you accidentally push in the middle, it'll go up and sideways. On this one, it doesn't do that. Unless you forcibly push up and sideways, as long as you push up in whatever location you want, it'll only register it as an up click or a down click or a side click. So now that we know what this modification does and how it fixes the Xbox 360 controller's D-pad, and trust me, it definitely fixes it for the better, let's go over how to do it. To fix this, we're going to have to open up the Xbox 360 controller and take it from the inside. So if you don't know how to disassemble it, I have an Xbox disassembling and assembling video on my page. Go ahead and look that up and meet me at the directional pad section. Okay, so I've disassembled the controller up to this point. Now let's go ahead and go into the D-pad section. We don't really need to take off these buttons for anything. Let's go ahead and peel this part off. Now, what you'll notice is that there is two things happening here. One is this slip of paper right here. All this is a piece of paper that I folded in half to make it a little bit thicker. And I've inserted it underneath the D-pad, like so. And it's the same height as the casing, so it doesn't, come over the top. It's nice and flush. Now the reason that the paper is there is because on the green one and my black one, it only sticks on the bottom, not on the side or the top. Only the bottom. And the same thing happened on my black one. So what I figured is that gravity was pulling it downward and forcing it to get that stick. And, when you don't have the paper, it's kind of jiggles around in here. It's not very, sturdy. So all we're doing is adding a little thin piece of paper. This is actually 2 layers of paper that's just folded over, or 1 layer that's folded over to make it thicker. And that just pushes up on the D-pad slightly, so it centers it more. So it's not sagging so much towards the bottom, and therefore it's not making contact, unlike this one, with the bottom of the casing. That also improves the D-pad's performance because it's not jiggling around nearly as much, and because of that, it doesn't push different directions accidentally. Now, I'll have you know that if you already have a D-pad that pushes in all 4 directions without touching, the sides, this might actually make it a little bit stiffer, and that's not what you want to do. So if you have a D-pad that sticks, go ahead and apply this piece of paper, and if you don't apply the piece of paper. But what you definitely need to apply regardless is this. This is a little ring that's made out of a thin piece of cardboard. What I would recommend is getting, pretty much anything that comes in a box, whether it be, Cheez-Its or, a cereal box, something like that. Just get a thin piece of cardboard, cut a circular shape. Doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously mine's crappy, but, as long as it works. Cut a hole in it so that, that center peg right there doesn't hit it. And all you have to do is just put it right there. That's all you have to do. And what that'll do is it adds a little bit of thickness to the Xbox D-pad. The reason that the D-pad is so squishy is because it floats around in there and it doesn't really, have a secure feel to it. So what happens is when you put that on top of the chipboard, it kind of just floats around and pushes the wrong buttons. But what this does is it adds a little bit of thickness. It also stiffens it a little bit so it doesn't float around nearly as much or squish around. And because of that, it makes the actions a lot more precise. So this D-pad in particular had 2 problems. It had the sagging problem where it was sticking, against the bottom of the casing. It also had the problem that all the Xbox controllers have, in which it's kind of squishy and doesn't really make a secure connection. So all you have to do is apply those 2 things and reassemble the controller. And once you do that, you'll notice that the Xbox controller is a lot more responsive, and the sticking, at least on the bottom portion, should go away. If for whatever reason it's sticking on somewhere that's not the bottom, simply move the piece of paper around to the side that it is sticking on. I've only had it happen on the bottom, so I really think it's because gravity is just pulling it down. But if you notice it's on other areas, try putting the paper on those other areas. Again, you don't want to use a thick paper for this. It's only supposed to be a fraction, of a millimeter, just a tiny little bit to push it higher. I tried using the same cardboard that I did on this ring, and it ended up being way too thick. So just a thin piece of paper, maybe double layer, maybe not any more than that, If you really want to experiment, you can try different thicknesses, but I found that one piece of paper folded over to make it twice as thick ended up working perfectly for me. So that's all you have to do. Let's go ahead and reassemble the controller. So once again, looking at the finished product, we can tell that none of the buttons touch this outer ring of the casing. And you can also tell that there's a firm click on all 4 of the buttons. If I push sideways, regardless of where I push sideways, as long as my motion is sideways, the button only goes sideways, whether it's in the diagonal section or the actual sideways section. Same thing applies when I go down. If I go down on the diagonal sections or down on the middle section, it only goes down as long as my motion is down. So you don't have to worry about being super picky or precise when you're doing these motions. Now, of course, if you want to go diagonal, if you push in a diagonal motion, it'll go diagonally. So this is how you fix the D-pad's responsiveness. This actually greatly increases how accurate the D-pad responds to your movements, and it also increases how accurately you press the buttons. When you don't have to worry about accidentally pushing down, as long as your motion is correct, you're less cautious, and it just gives you, greater control and greater feel over the D-pad in general. So although a lot of people complain about the Xbox D-pad, with a few modifications you can actually make it a very good piece of equipment. So I hope this video helps. If you have any questions, feel free to post a comment below. And thank you for watching. If you need help on the disassembly, once again, I do have a video on my page covering the disassembly and reassembly. So So make sure to check that out. I'll also have links to that video in the description box. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.